That brings us to item 7, which is the downtown vision update. Terry?
Good evening.
Good evening.
Mask off okay up
You're
here?
fine.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. It's good to be back in front of you. Terry Berkbuegleer with Confluence, planning consultant out of Kansas City. Been working with the community on developing this vision for the new downtown district, just out adjacent to the administration center here. Tonight, we're here to give you a preview of the plan refinements since the last time we talked. We've been taking community input. We had a public meeting a while back. I want to run you through that real quickly and then go through some of the updates we've been making to the plan, show you some illustrations of how that's developing and how we're incorporating the input that we received, and then talk a little bit about what the next steps are. Ultimately, we want to get any questions you have tonight. I'll be happy to answer those, or you can pass those on to Sean after tonight, and he can get those to us as we continue to refine the summary document. So just to make sure everybody recalls where we are, you can see City Administration Center there on 61st, and it's essentially the property to the south and east that wraps around behind the library, behind the City Administration, and over toward Hydraulic, up to the senior center and the senior housing over there. This was a concept plan that we last reviewed with you, and Matt, there are a couple of follow-up slides on this you can go ahead and click through. So this showed mixed-use area up in the northeast corner, some single-family attached housing down in the southeast and along that southern border to kind of transition and set up against the housing that's there already to the south. The introduction of a new senior housing facility over on the west, adjacent to the existing senior facilities. Potentially the introduction of a farmer's market and shared parking facility just to the east of that. Even the concept for the introduction of a community center in Park City. Something that obviously is significant investment, but would take some additional study to determine the feasibility and the interest of that for the community, and that would be nestled in against the library to create kind of a strong civic campus, if you will, adjacent to this facility. And then finally, significant outdoor green space, that central civic space, and then more active play down kind of in the south central portion of the property there with maybe spray ground, playground, dog park, and some sport courts. So I want to go through quickly some of the information that we heard from the community. Oh my, I can't even read those from here, so I hope you guys can. But essentially the key is we had over 250 respondents. We met with the chamber, presented things to them, got some initial feedback and input from members at that, and they actually invited folks from the senior community to that chamber meeting. So we had a fairly good sized crowd there. The public meeting we had, I believe we had around 35 people approximately participate that evening. And then we had this online and had significant interest there. You can see the majority of those people are residents of Park City, but then there were some that they may work in Park City or perhaps just own property in Park City but don't necessarily live here. Some of the key words we heard, we asked people to sort of tell us what resonates with them for this new district, community, entertainment. The larger they are, the more they were shown or told to us. Something fun, something for families, walkable, inviting. You know, I don't think any of these things would be surprising that this is what the community feels like would be some much needed space and amenities and activities in the community. We asked them to give us a sense of, from an architectural design character, without being too specific, just on a sliding scale of 1 to 10, on the left side there, 1 being something more traditional, up to the right side being something more contemporary. And you can see there folks landed sort of in the middle to the left, so something more traditional, but there's some interest in maybe being a little bit contemporary. So That just gives us a sense of architectural character that the community might want to see. We also talked about density, and by that, really at this point, it's about maybe building height, building scale. So again, we're creating a vision. We're not really designing the finished product right now, but for you to inform developers in the future of what your vision is, this helps us try to build that image. So taking some of these words and some of these thoughts and making those into a more physical, visible form. So you can see there that really folks are leaning to something not too dense, 2 to 3 story. But we also look at that and say there is interest in potentially something a little taller, 3 to 4 story, as well as a significant number of folks that responded on something on the lower end. But if you count up all those responses there, you've got about 90. So not quite half of those folks really leaning, or half of that score leaning more toward that 2 to 3 story as a good sort of max density size. We asked them questions about what they'd like to see in the streetscape and the civic spaces, programming, things like that, and just rank what would your top 4 be. So it really forced people in that entire list of elements on the left, it forced them to prioritize and pick in their mind what would be their top 4 things they would like to see in the streetscape. So you can see we've just kind of identified the top 4 vote getters. It doesn't mean the others aren't important. This means those are the ones that rank the highest out of all the participants in their 4 votes. Green infrastructure, some street planting, streetscaping, lighting, obviously, and then seating. So, but you kind of work your way down that, and you can see there's opportunities for art, public art, and things like that as well. Civic space. Interest in maybe water features. Those could be more sculptural, more playful, maybe an outdoor amphitheater space, park space, just more green, open flex space. So those are sort of the things people ranked on the higher end of things. But as we go through these concepts, you'll begin to see that a number of these elements still make their way into the project. Preferred programs, so what types of activities? So you can kind of see the top end there. The farmers market ranked really high. Opportunity for food truck activities, water play, again, kind of thinking about that water feature concept on the last one. Food, drink, festivals, things like that. So community gathering opportunities, events, just a lot of opportunity for family and gathering. Dog park ranked up there, having a movie night even, having concerts. So as we take that and translate that into the design, it's how can we achieve as many of these opportunities as possible, and a lot of that will lead to flexibility of design. And then, we asked people to sort of say, out of all of that, what do you think is the most important thing that the city needs right now? Because that really then makes them think, what is the most important thing in my mind? Clearly, right there, dining and restaurants, something more than what's available today. Entertainment, we heard a lot of discussion throughout this process about something for people to do at night, whether they're residents who live here that currently go to Wichita or other places for nighttime entertainment, or people that are coming in on the weekend for race weekend or other events, that they can find something fun to do in Park City, stay, enjoy, spend their dollars here. What other amenities and activities would you like to see specifically in this downtown district now? Before it was really talking, what does the community sort of overall need? Now specifically down here, opportunity for concerts, water features, a lot of those things you've already seen. Trails was a big one. So, quality of life is really a big ticket item here. Outdoor activities, opportunities for food trucks, family activities. So again, it's really telling us this is a place where the community and the people that responded to this said, this is where we want to have a place for gatherings. For our families, we want our kids to grow up and want to stay or come back and raise their families. And that takes, quality housing, quality places, and events and things to do. Okay? I'm not going to try to read that, even with my good eye. But there were a few things on here. You don't want to lose sight of those important things, which are really over in that other column. because it is important. Fix the streets, do the things you need to be doing first, and you'll hear that in any community before we begin to dream too much of the dream, or we begin to think too big. Let's make sure we're taking care of the important things first. Doesn't mean you can't do both, but it's good to not lose sight of that. So right now, this is a project and an opportunity to really dream and think about the bold long-term vision for this space, but not losing the identity of who Park City is. This should be something that people come to and they know they're in Park City. What does that mean? We don't know yet. That will come further down the road. Services for seniors, that kind of goes back to walkability. What can they potentially live here and walk to? Beyond restaurants, what about pharmacies and shopping and groceries, day-to-day needs? So there's a lot of these other comments that actually make their way into this plan as well. Okay, so now I'm going to go through a whole series of views. So this is the plan, and you'll see, if you recall back in your mind what it looked like before. Essentially, the framework is still there. The roadway patterning, this single-family attached housing along the southern edge, the park space in the middle. The northeast corner potentially sees some of the most change as we've really started to define that more in building form and public space in response to what we heard. As well as the senior housing and market and community center. All the parts and pieces are still in their relative space. We've just started to define those further. And another thing that we do as we're designing spaces like this is begin to think of them with a personality. So whether it's a brand or a name or what have you, it just helps us communicate that. And it doesn't mean that that's what these things will always be called, but so for now, you're going to see us refer to the mixed-use area as the district. The central area as the district green, district park, and the district market. Doesn't mean that will stick or that has any importance other than our concept right now, but it helps us to have this conversation. So, and again, the specific components, up in the northeast corner, there's really that mixed-use commercial component. We think maybe along 61st Street, it makes more sense to primarily focus on residential. And as we've been looking at all along, that's probably where more of the density would go, is up along that major street. And then the single family attached housing can provide that buffer to the south and to the southeast, where you've already got some duplex single family attached type housing. And we think that from a scale and density and neighborhood style, it makes a good transition. As you come off of 61st into that mixed-use area along what's called right now Stewart, that's where we see an opportunity to mix in more commercial. So maybe some ground floor commercial, and you'll see that in some of the illustrations. We're not talking about a lot of commercial. This wouldn't be a regional commercial center. I'm going to preface these quantities, these numbers with, this is not based on a market study or pro forma right now. Again, this is the big vision. This is the dream that then you can hope to have development partners aspire to with you. And ultimately, they would come forward with that data to confirm that the project works for them. And it's going to look different, but this at least gives you a sort of a reach goal, if you will, or stretch goal. We're looking at, in that mixed-use area, you might have, say, 70,000 square feet of commercial. So that could house maybe a half dozen restaurants, maybe fewer. They could be larger, could be smaller, some coffee shop, cafe type spaces, more service-oriented type retail. Maybe you've got small, maybe there's a pharmacy in there, dry cleaner, things like that. The other thing is it's responding to what we're seeing in the market these days, and it's a lot of those services, the services you can't get online are still very viable in some of these leasable spaces. So it's barbershops, salons, cleaners, things like that. Wine shops, really good, kind of focusing more on local. There was a comment on that, others, that said, we don't need a Starbucks. What we take from that is maybe we should prioritize local, regional first, and then and that helps sort of reinforce that sense of Park City-centric identity. You can go back to that, Matt. And I just want to hit these numbers, and then I'll start to click through these a little quicker. So in terms of numbers, the mixed-use area, We don't have a mix in terms of unit types. Could be a mix of studio, single, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom. You could get maybe up to 300, 350 units in there. Really kind of depends on what mix is appropriate, but there's some decent density that you could build up there. And even within that, it's feasible. That's the beauty of it, is it's not like you've got to deliver every building at the same time. In that, and I keep referring to it as that single family attached. On there it still says multifamily, but the housing along the bottom, row house, townhouse, condo type attached, those could be split apart. Someone might come in and say, we can do some of that, but we still need maybe a few single family detached units. Right now we're showing 126. That's just a ballpark. It could be a few less or a few more. Senior housing, that building over to the west could be, that could hold 60 or 70 on a 3-story type product there. That could go up or down based on what a developer thinks is an appropriate bed count for them and for their product. We're seeing some of those become more active senior and a little bit more of a club or boutique, as opposed to what people have historically thought of in senior housing, assisted living, things like that. This could be something that's maybe more active aging. Community center, again, that's ultimately going to be reliant upon what the community thinks is appropriate. But that, just to give you a sense of scale, would show a high school-sized gymnasium, potentially some indoor aquatics, a lot of public meeting space, and maybe about a 50,000 square foot facility. That's not huge, but it's not small either for a community of this size. We think it's reasonable to look at as a goal. The park space, the smaller lawns, so you'll see this where the word amphitheater is up there, and you'll see it in some of the illustrations. So there's a small band shell there. That more intimate lawn space could hold an event of maybe 400 to 500 people. It really depends on how it's set up. And then the larger space, that larger civic green space, you could have a significant festival in there. If you had a large concert, 3,000 to 4,000 people. But you could also configure it in so many different ways with tents and things like that. It's really the key there is open space for people to play and configure however they want. But it gives you a sense of the scale. And then the farmer's market, what's shown there is something that could hold within the shed itself, and this would be sort of a dual purpose parking during the week or during non-market hours. And then it can house 30 to 40 vendors within the structure or underneath the shed, but then you can set up that whole parking lot with more tents depending upon what type of event you might want to have there. Okay, so Matt, let's start clicking through. So here's a view. We're going to kind of fly around, look at some different views. So this is a view if you're sort of hovering up over just south of 61st Street, looking to the southeast. So you're looking over that civic space. There's a treed area there called the Grove that might be a nice shady spot within the park to sit, some picnic shelters, a playground, and then you can see that maybe more intimate amphitheater space there just on the right edge of that. And then you can see down there in the forefront how we're beginning to use some signage to create kind of that iconic sense of place within the area. As you come down in, maybe there's an opportunity for a little cafe in the park. Could be something that's privately operated. Maybe it's a sandwich shop, coffee shop, whatever. But just something that activates that space. It could be a revenue generator for the city. Could be something you privatize. Looking at, again, that community center as a very, very generic sort of model right now. Just thinking there's a placeholder in the plan for that. And at that time, it could be connected to or disconnected, but somehow adjacent to the library to sort of build that strong civic core. And maybe at that time, there's a renovation that makes the library fit the architecture of this building and that building. So thinking ahead to some of those things. And then in the background, you can see how that mixed-use commercial starts to look. And then as we swing around on Stewart and we're looking north into that mixed-use commercial district, you can see we're really trying to create a place, trying to create that plaza. So when the community said someplace to gather, someplace for families to get together, well, you've got the park, but you've also got a space that's maybe a little bit more active, potentially. So I can go inside, I can buy some ice cream, I can come out here, The kids can splash around in some water. We can hang out in the shade. But the other thing we were talking about is, because of how this is set up, so the first floor of those buildings, what we're envisioning is that would be your commercial space on these buildings in the foreground. So wrapped around with some smaller scale, really nice restaurants, shops, things like that. This could be configured in a way that you could actually purchase drinks in the restaurants and actually have this space where you can have the ability to carry drinks out into this. So it really becomes sort of a very dynamic and diverse event type space. Or there's even potentially the opportunity to have food trucks that pull up into this. There's just a lot of different ways to use this space. And then kind of flying over the more residential, so you can see you've got, what are the amenities for those apartments and what does that look like as they're facing 61st. The architecture is relatively generic right now. We're focusing more on mass and scale, but you can kind of get a sense for what that feels like. And then how it is complemented across the street by that single family attached and something that might be a little more urban. Maybe it's more urban along the main road there, and maybe as you get farther south into it, it might break down into smaller buildings. And then on the southeast corner, looking over the retention pond and creating that as an amenity for the entire property. And those trails then along the perimeter really give the entire community the opportunity to use this space. So it's not just for residents of this district. So it is an amenity for the entire community and connects up with the park and trails just to the north as well.
Pardon me.
And then spinning around, you're looking at the south. You can see the sport courts there, a number of pickleball courts, which is the hottest thing right now in sports. I'm seeing some nodding and some eyebrows. Yes. I have yet to see an empty pickleball court this year. It's like second to golf and things people can do outside during COVID. And then other sport courts. But you see that active play, and then you can see the opportunity for some single family. And again, I don't want to overstate this, or I don't think I can overstate it, that this is a model. There are different ways that developers may want to approach that single family. But what we heard was maybe something more dense in this area. And then you can see how this all really focuses on that central green space. And then within that active play area, you've got opportunity for dog park. Maybe there's some bocce courts or some other type of activity. Some picnic shelter, park shelter, shaded areas. Maybe there's a playground. It could be dry, wet, splash playground combo. We've done some of those as well. But really, that is sort of the neighborhood park almost. It's open to anyone in the community, but it really provides a great amenity for the residents of this neighborhood. Right out their front door. And then you kind of spinning around there, just looking back at the sport courts there, and then kind of giving you a scale of the whole property. This is not a small property. 48 acres may not seem like much when you're driving around it and you see it, but when you start adding buildings and people and scale, that's why we do these studies, because it really gives you a sense of this is a really significant undertaking. You all probably know that, but I think this helps to reinforce to everyone that this is not an overnight vision. And to get it the way you want it, you're taking the right steps of thinking about it all together rather than just sort of putting it out there and seeing what comes. Coming down into that the district park, you can kind of see how that feels and opportunities for public art throughout. And just trying to activate those green spaces as much as possible. The green spaces are as much about providing something for the community as they are in helping to incentivize developers, because it's an amenity that they can sell to if they're an apartment owner or apartment builder who's going to hold that property, that's a great amenity for them to be able to sell. If it's someone who's trying to sell lots and they've got that park, that helps them sell lots if they're not going to hold those properties. It's a great thing to help attract businesses that might want to lease, whether it's office or retail space, because they see, as well as businesses that aren't even within this district, are looking for where they want to land and provide amenities for their employees. So more and more, Parks and Recreation and Quality of Life is a serious tool in your economic development quiver, and things like this will really pay off beyond just this 48 acres for you. And, more in that space. This is more in the central lawn. We're getting my bearings here, so we're looking back. We'd be looking to the east here, maybe hovering, sorry. Yeah, we're looking to the west. It's the senior housing there in the distance. And you can kind of see community center just kind of peeking over that kind of north, the right-hand edge. But, maybe there's some sculpture garden opportunities. These are opportunities where you can partner with other organizations, whether it's WashU or some other programs, or sponsoring with private organizations that might want to help create these types of amenities. And then that market, you can see how this is just a very quick concept of what that could look like, but the concept is similar to a lot of those. Open air shed. If you wanted to take that a bit further, you could enclose it, make it, garage doors that open. It can become a year-round rentable space. But you can see how that can then activate that into that park. It could be done on a time when there's nothing else going on in the park, and it just is another reason for people to come. And then looking at the residential neighborhood there at the southwest corner, and you can kind of see how a senior housing building can fit in. It doesn't look out of place, but it really, I think, provides a good multi-generational housing option. So you've got young families, maybe singles, service industry in some of these apartments, all the way up to your active aging and your seniors. So you've got an opportunity to hit all generations and demographic. And then another view just kind of spinning around the site and pulling back a little bit. So before we wrap up, what's next? So we're finalizing this plan and these illustrations. We'll be adding a little bit more, not a lot more detail, but a little bit more kind of finessing the images, I guess you can say. But the real piece that we're working on next is that design intent narrative. So we're not going so far as to say design guideline or design standard, because we don't want to hem it in too much. But what we do want to do is give potential developers sort of a playbook that the city is going to go by. And within that, we'll be discussing site development and configuration. So taking these things we've heard about density and what goes where on the site, and putting that into something that helps a developer and their design team understand, okay, and contractor team, if this is what they're looking for, that gives us an indication of order of magnitude, sort of price point, whether it's construction and ultimately backing in there, what is the pro forma, what is the potential lease rate that's going to fit what the city is wanting to see here for apartments and things like that, the building massing. Preferred materials. So, we're not going to say it shall be this many square feet of glass versus brick or anything, but at least provide a general guide of what are the materials that the community prefers to see here. That's when you begin to sort of set a standard for quality, but also help to define the image and protect that identity that people have talked about. If we want something that is distinguishable and doesn't just look like every other project out there. Right now, it looks fairly generic, and that's intentional because we're not designing the final thing yet. And then these green spaces, giving a little bit more narrative definition of what those can be, and then the urban design character, what happens in the streets and the streetscapes and things like that. That really helped us to tell the story and define that character. All right, Matt? So this is just a quick fly through the site, and then we'll wrap it up and answer questions. And Sean, I don't think I kept 15 minutes like I said I would. You didn't think I could. So this gives you a sense of sort of how it all fits together. Just kind of flying around the mixed use area there on the left, park on the right. You can see some of the opportunities for sculpture in these green spaces. And then how that plaza space. We're trying to create more public plaza here at the foreground, but then let it be more private as it moves up into the north where it's more residential. Kind of hovering up over the park there and the active play area. And then we'll move back around to the south side of the Civic Green. and then kind of that amphitheater space in the market and senior housing. And I'd say, throughout, this is there's a very flexible plan here. Things aren't packed in too tightly. I think they have room to breathe, which does a couple of things. It allows you to provide green space. It's not over dense, but it also allows flexibility for the final product to respond to market and to what a developer says, hey, I can do this. It may not be exactly what you had on there, but yes, this keeps it close to our vision. We can feel good about moving this forward. So it gives you some room, and it gives them some room to really design the final product a little bit better than if we had things sort of shoehorned in there too tightly. All right, Matt, and then this is the end. This is what we think could be a pretty exciting place to be. Anxious to answer any questions you have and, work with the team to continue to refine this.
Does anybody have any questions? It's more mind-blowing than George.
Well, I have one, and I don't see anything on here that would concern me that way. But the one thing that drives me crazy is these tall signs, these tall flashing commercial signs. And like we've got one over here in this old shopping center with the flashing lights that drive people nuts at night.
Mm-hmm.
And I would hope that I've been up to Overland Park a couple of times, and it's really impressive the fact that they don't have any tall signs. Really makes that town look nice.
Well, so those are the types of things that we can put in here. And we can make that, and even at this early stage, to minimize, and there's a reason we're not big fans of that either, and I don't think this is the appropriate place for those. Those tend to be more highway-oriented typically. And so I think your point is it's a good one. That's the type of input we want to hear to make sure that we're maybe putting in protection for those types of things.
Well, I know they can do it because Ray and I went over to McDonald's and ate breakfast there at Overland Park, and their Golden Arch, it wasn't big like it is most places. They were apparently willing to work with Overland Park on that.
Mm-hmm. And there are different tools depending upon where the city wants to ultimately go in terms of regulating this property or others within the community. There are different tools that can be used. And, we're not there right now, but design guidelines or the way this comes forward, if it's some sort of planned development district, and you can, work with the developer to write in those requirements. So there's a lot of ways that you can protect yourself from those, but that's why we have those discussions now. So we're starting to set the stage without having too many teeth, but we're at least saying, hey, this is where we're headed. So when you get some developers interested in talking to them, they're not caught too off guard by that.
It looks good.
All right. Ben?
Back when we had, I think it might have been December timeframe, November timeframe, our first meeting there, you all had a time, let me rephrase that as a question. Did you all have a time there where you met with developers and such in the area just to kind of get a feasibility of what the market's looking like?
So we had a meeting, an open meeting with developers, folks from the development, contracting community, design community in the kind of Wichita metro. Had a pretty good turnout. I would say there was good discussion that gave us a sense that we weren't too far out in left field. I think that's what we were hoping to come away with was, hey, if we're doing something here that just isn't going to work, tell us. We want to, without showing their cards, just give us an idea. Do you think we're out in left field? And we came away with that, and I think Sean would reiterate that we got what we needed, which was, okay, this has some merit, and we felt like we could continue down this road, and we weren't too far off of a real marketable product.
It looks really great, and I will say I am much more of a fan of private development, and rather than getting too far in the weeds on public side of it, they're just giving the markets a chance to run it rather than us, but I appreciate what you all put in here on this.
Thank you.
Anybody? Jim? And then
I don't really have any questions other than just to say I really like how you put it together, and I think it's I like this concept. This is pretty slick. It's neat to see it on paper and starting to take some kind of form. I mean, there's $100 million plus probably in real estate development here, depending on what these buildings look like, and that'd be an awful big investment in our city, and definitely like the idea. Keep it open to the private industries and let the laws of supply and demand see what it'll bring. But I like it, like the amphitheater. I like a lot of things about this.
Well, I appreciate that. And our philosophy on projects at this early stage is really what we're saying. It's you define the vision, but don't over define it to where it either pushes you out of the market or it scares people away that you're going to be too restrictive. But make a clear statement that you're willing to partner. And I think that's been what we've heard all along, is this is a partnership opportunity. This isn't something the city can or would do all themselves. And the other thing, on the magnitude or the scale, this is, driving around here today again, just kind of reminded me, this is where a developer and, when they start looking at feasibility, they'll start looking at maps and what supports this. And you look beyond Park City to fill these apartments and these houses. Yes, this is going to be an opportunity for current residents to maybe move to a different location, maybe upgrade or stay as they get older. But what's the market outside of Park City today? And it's not too far away from things like Coke industry. You've got some well-paid young professionals that are within reach of a place like this. And you start looking at what other options do they have like this, potentially, that are as close to work. And so that's part of what we look at as well, is everybody wants to know what their commute time is. And if you can provide an attractive option that's shorter than others, then that's a benefit. And so that's, when you start looking beyond the Park City proper, you'll start to see there really is, some more room in the market for something like this. That, there are people that earn a decent wage working in industry. You've got a lot of industry. And I think the other thing is providing a mix. So you're going to have a lot of new jobs potentially coming in. So that'll be part of what you're going to want to work through in defining what you want from a developer in terms of housing. Something that's affordable to a broad range. Doesn't mean it has to be an income qualified product, but do you have something that can be approachable by a wide range of your current as well as some of those future employees that are going to be coming in to work some of these new jobs? So those are the things that kind of that next step down the road that you're going to have to start thinking about.
Real quick before you jump in here, George, the one thing I think of when I look at the green space is like the Sedgwick County Park and how huge of a section that is and what that attracts as far as people willing to live around that. And I see a duplication here of that, of having so much green space that it would attract people to here because of exactly what you said earlier, because a developer can sell that as well as the property.
Right.
And, it makes it more desirable. And I think it also makes more desirable for the rest of the community, the way we have the tie-in with the walking paths hooked up to our existing parks. That's pretty exciting.
Yeah.
George?
Yeah, I was just encouraged by the number of residents who showed up to give vision and insight on what they want to see in Park City. That's one of the things we've had issues with is, let's see what your vision is for this city. So let's invite folks in, and I appreciate the way that it was done. As far as proximity to Wichita, it takes me 20 minutes to get to my job in central Wichita from here. So the proximity to come out here and enjoy these spaces I think are going to be great as far as what we provide the citizens, not only of Park City, but also other citizens as well, the proximity around us. But with Amazon and Coke and some, like you said, some of those higher paying positions, those folks are going to need places to live. And I think we're on the right track in providing that. So I appreciate your insight on this.
Absolutely.
The other thing that's exciting is just the different levels of housing. I mean, I've talked about it multiple times that we need somebody for every stage of life where they can continue to stay here, because some people, they really enjoy it here. And, you know, to make sure we have some senior housing that somebody can get into. The young professional at Coke that may not want to worry about yard maintenance or anything like that, having something that has a downtown feel to it, that's just minutes away from work.
Yep. Now, we heard that from the very beginning, is range of housing product, and to serve a range of demographic in the community. And you know, that started with the city having the vision to even acquire this property back when it did, and say that you're going to do more than just wait and see what the market will bring to you for housing, and these other amenities and services, but actually being a little more proactive. And doesn't mean you're going to build it, but it means you've got a stake in, you know, a greater stake in what that can be now. And so, you know, it'll take time. It's not an overnight, as I said. You know, Rome wasn't built in a day. This won't be built in a day. But I think if you find some good partners, and I think we had some good partners in the room that day that are, you know, would be interested in continuing the conversation.
Anybody else?
Mayor, if I could, as far as timing, the one thing that we do need to do, and we've talked about this earlier, is somewhere within the next 2 to 3 weeks, they'll put the final touches on the actual written portion of it, the report. But then we want to run that through planning and zoning first. So that will be the month of April. So the next time, I know everyone wants to get going on this, how quick, but it'll probably be about the first or second meeting in May that we will be bringing it back, having been through planning and zoning first with their recommendation, hopefully for the council to adopt it or incorporate this into the comprehensive plan as a new appendix or chapter. So
I don't think anybody wants to rush this, but I mean, we definitely want to make sure we nail some of those design standards, because
yes, sir.
That was the whole point of capturing that project or this property, is so that we can control some of that and make sure we end up with a great final product.
Well, and as we talk, that next meeting, then that'll be one where we want to get you guys that document ahead of time so you have a chance to read it, think about it, and then when we talk about it here, we can, you know, find out what else we want to hit in there that isn't covered. So it'll be a good input session.
Well, I want to thank you and your team. You've done a phenomenal job.
Well, we appreciate the opportunity. It's been a fun and continues to be a fun project. So these are the exciting ones to help see these things come about. So we're looking forward to seeing this thing all the way through.
Thank you.
Thank
So
you.
thanks. Have a good day.
Appreciate it.